Good afternoon. I'd like to share a story with you about my first experience with a startup company. Tibra Captial is a securities and derivatives trading firm, buying and selling securities on electronic markets all around the world, with our own capital and our own customised software. Traders like activity, busy markets, volatility. The more volatile a market, the bigger the difference between the price we can buy securities at and sell, which is essentially bigger profit margins. And in 2006, we set out to build a trading team and a software development team and go to compete against some of the biggest banks, hedge funds in the world, and some big financial institutions. We had no customers, we didn't sell any products, we had no outside investors, but we did have 17 staff on the first day, which was September 2006. A little bit about what Tibra is. Very different in many ways. Having a crappy office, I think we're not very different to startups at all in that sense. That's what we walked into on the first day. And that's us setting up our operations. Now, when we were planning the launch of our trading operations, we gave ourselves about 20 weeks to get ready for trading in September. And that involved a huge infrastructure installation, servers in different countries. There was no cloud back then, and certainly not for an industry like ours where it was quite specialised software. We had to write a mountain of software, and we had to build our own trading strategies and build everything from scratch. And we also had to go through major banking and regulatory relationship building, getting licensing, approvals, and so on. So it was a very hectic 20 weeks. We hired, as I said, we started with 17 people. We recruited from within our industry, and we recruited some of the best software developers that I've ever met. I'm constantly in awe of software developers, I must say. And while we were going through this process, we'd planned to launch into the Australian and Hong Kong markets in that 20 weeks. Now, we decided at some point to add to that the Japanese market, the South Korean market, and the Singaporean market. And I thought it's a little bit ambitious, but why don't we give it a go and launch into 5 markets at once? So our story really begins on the 9th of October 2006. We have been trading for a few weeks. We've rolled into 5 different countries at once, all from our Sydney office here in Bondi Junction. And as good as our software team was, they haven't been able to build our custom trading software yet. They're still a month or 2 away. So we're essentially trading manually. Now, in a world where the machines are dominating, and I'm sure many of you have heard about the way financial markets operate, we were buying and selling securities with a mouse, and to buy something you had to double click on it and enter some information and hit enter, and it was very, very old school. But we were just testing. We'd been only going a couple of weeks, and we thought, look, we're learning a lot. We're just testing our strategies out and so on. And I happened to be trading into the Korean market. Now, I'd never traded Korea before. I'd never been to Korea. I barely knew where it was. And I didn't know anything about the market except that it's like the Wild West. The Korean stock market had a product based around their exchange, their index, the Kospi 200, similar to our ASX 200. And it was the busiest equity product in the world. Just absolute chaos. It was not a product you could trade without a very sophisticated system. There were some other markets you could, like Australia and Hong Kong, which is why we'd started there. But this was not one of them. So we were really just waiting. Now, on this day, 9th of October 2006, something quite extraordinary happened. The North Korean government launched and detonated a nuclear weapon underground, very, very close to South Korea. And as you may know, they don't really get along. and this incident was unannounced. It came without warning, and basically all hell broke loose. The market went into a severe panic, and it crashed. Now, normally when a market crashes, prices fall quickly and heavily, but on this occasion the market actually crashed. The servers went down, basically the stock exchange just broke, and it froze and complete chaos, so no one really knows what's happening. And there I am, a few weeks into a new business, with no software to trade with, just my mouse, wondering, what have I got myself into? Now, ordinarily, when this happens, stock markets do have outages from time to time. They just shut it down and they resolve the issue and then they start it back up again. And that of itself is not completely unheard of. But on this occasion, a very strange thing happened. The market didn't shut. The stock exchange was publishing prices and kept the market open despite the fact that their servers had completely gone out of control. And in fact, the index, which is comprised of 200 biggest companies in South Korea, started to display a price of 0. This meant the Korean stock market was telling the world that the entire market was worthless. Now, of course, this was incorrect, but who knew what was going on? Now, again, ordinarily, when this happens, most of the computers around the world that are automatically trading into these markets, will see such a disruption or an outage, and they will know to shut down. And certainly the well-designed ones did and would, and ours would have had they been ready. But there was one gentleman, I don't know who he was, I like to think of him as Mr. SK, sitting over there in Seoul, and he left his machine on, or it didn't turn off, I don't know why. Now, in a market where everything is worth 0, the price of insurance is essentially skyrocketing. Derivatives have certain contracts that are like insurance contracts. I won't go into the details, but essentially, as the market goes down, they go up in value. Now, this gentleman's pricing was completely out of order because he was basing his prices as though the entire stock market was worthless, which clearly it wasn't. So something worth $2,500, a relatively small transaction, he bid that into the market, which was open despite being completely broken, and he was out by a factor of 1,000. So instead of bidding $2,500, he bid $2.5 million. Now, most stock exchanges around the world cancel transactions that are manifestly incorrect. There's only 1 or 2 in the world that don't, and you guessed it, South Korea is one of them. So, the other thing, these error trades happen all the time, and there's normally 1,000 computers waiting, and they're like infinitely fast mousetraps that sit there and wait in cyberspace, waiting to snap up any of these beautiful little transactions that come about that are clearly you're going to make a profit from. 99.9% of trades you do, you're probably not sure if you'll make a profit, but on these you do. So ordinarily these things get snapped up, but on this day, at this moment, all the computers in the world that would ordinarily trade that and take advantage of that error had shut themselves down. So there I was trading manually with my trusty mouse, and the benefit of, I suppose, being an experienced trader, I'd worked as a trader before starting this firm. In 2 seconds, I was able to double-click my mouse, hit enter a couple of times with a colleague of mine, a co-founder of mine, a man who stayed amazingly cool under pressure, and we sold to this poor gentleman who we called Mr. SK $2,500 worth of securities for $2.5 million. Now, they say a second or two can change your life, and for me and for us, it was a game changer. Apart from the obvious financial benefits, the ability for us to accelerate our hiring, our development, and our expansion, and it gave us a tremendous amount of confidence. So we then decided, not satisfied with 5 countries in Asia, we were going to bring forward our expansion into the European markets and open up an office in London. And we came up with the ridiculous deadline of the 1st of July 2007. It was about 8 months later. I don't know why we did that, but we managed to push ourselves to do it. So the lesson from that crazy little day in Korea, market only finished down 2.5% in the end. I think the world figured out that maybe a nuclear device wasn't such a bad thing if it was just a test and it was underground. But the lessons were important to us. One, that despite believing and seeing a world being dominated by technology and machines and automation, there was huge value in the human element that goes with it, the human training, skills, expertise and collaboration that understands how software is built, what happens when it goes wrong, and so on. And secondly, it only takes an instant. So back on that first point, we really believed that it was all about the talent, and that talent was either trading talent or software talent, but ultimately it was talent that would win the game regardless, and technologies would come and go, and that's a theme that was very strong for us. The second thing was that you had to be pretty careful. Like, you couldn't do this in Australia. You couldn't lose $2.5 million like that if you tried. But you could destroy your business in an instant, and we were lucky to be on the right side of this on this day. A few years later, an ex-colleague of mine at a different firm that he'd actually started in Hong Kong had a complete blow-up in Korea as well, and they lost a rumoured $15 million, and they were guys our age who'd worked with us previously and gone away and started a firm. And that's obviously devastating. And not long after that, not that long ago, a company called Knight Securities in the US, a big company, they had a complete meltdown of their systems, and they were forced to disclose to the market that they lost $400 million with software just going out of control and buying stuff at crazy prices and not being able to unwind those positions. So that was a lesson to us about what can happen. Now, the third lesson was just sometimes it's just your day. The sequence of events that led me to be in that chair. We'd brought forward the expansion into Korea. We hadn't got any software, so we were trading very differently. We were trading very old school techniques, and we weren't expecting anything, but we were alert. And then all the computers had shut down, and all these things led to that one moment. And sometimes that's just a piece of luck you have to take advantage of. So I talked a bit about our culture, about the talent on it. Just want to show you through. So this slideshow is one of the first I produced. You can see our old logo. I don't have any graphic design capabilities whatsoever, so I'd like to say my PowerPoints have improved in 8 years, but I couldn't do better than this even today. The philosophy: to be active across electronic markets, to be diversified, to have superior trading skills, pricing and development, to be growth-oriented, aggressive, disciplined, but also to be respectful. And all of these things, really came to the fore in that particular situation in Korea and would come to the fore again, and I think was a big part of our success. Common goals: to be the best, to be the fastest, to have the best systems. You can have the best traders, but if you don't have the best systems, you'll never be as competitive as you like to be. And equally, you can have the best technology in the world, but if you don't have really great people, you're not going to make it. Now, we at the peak had about 250 staff, of which about 90 to 100 were traders and about the same were technologists. So we'd come out of an industry where, I remember being in a desk of 12 traders and we had no IT guys. In fact, the guy who'd come and fix our computer when it broke was an out-of-work actor who was doing tuna commercials, and he would come over after like 3 hours and plug our thing back in, and that was the extent of our IT. So it changed dramatically in 5 or 6 years, and we felt very much that it was going that way. We hired one for one. We raised the salaries of software developers around the world and made them really equity partners and a real part of what we were building. We were responsible for some massive wage inflation in the software development industry, so but to me they were worth every penny. We had some metrics. I don't want to bore you with them. They're risk-adjusted returns, how much capital you're risking to make a certain amount of profit. We always focused a lot more on profit than revenue because ultimately our business revolved around talent, and you can't put a multiple on talent and sell it to a VC or a private equity firm or float it, unfortunately. We said, what are our keys to success? We had a vision of 250 staff in 4 continents. This was a 6-year plan, global operations, quality of staff. We talked about what commitment meant to us. Discipline and motivation are 2 very important things to me. Finding people, fair structure, being proactive and urgent, seeing an opportunity, and obviously being someone with initiative. Our culture was around excellence. This was something we just said, how do we build a culture of excellence? So that's what we stand for, is excellence. We were very informal. We were shorts and thongs and singlets, whatever the weather demanded, very informal culture. But we wanted to be known for our work and not how we looked or spoke. And I think, we were able in those initial years of recruiting to maintain that culture of excellence. And we talked a bit about the future. So this presentation is either late 06 or early 07. I believe it's probably after October. We talked a bit about our culture, our growth, consolidating, and so on. Now, as you can probably gather, we weren't like other startups. We didn't have any customers, so we had no challenges around customer acquisition, pricing, branding, all these things that must cause people to tear their hair out. We had no outside investors, so we were very inward focused. It doesn't mean we weren't producing a great product. We actually were producing amazingly good software, but our clients were the traders in our own teams, and they could be very, very demanding. And obviously, me as a trader, was one of those. So we didn't have the same sort of talk. Like, I don't remember ever talking about the word startup. I don't remember referring to us as a startup. So I think we just were people that did what we wanted to do. We had a background in this area, and we felt we could do it better and fairer, and we felt that the world really was, our sort of opportunity set. So we didn't concentrate too much on Australia, although we did in the people sense. We had at least 120, 130, so half our staff located in Sydney, and that was an interesting time for us. So. We're out of the blocks. 2006, September we launched, and in 2008-09 year, as Rick mentioned, we did about $270 million in trading revenue. And more importantly, we did about $70 million in profit. And that was inside our 3rd year. So it gave us a tremendous amount of confidence, and obviously we rode some very interesting times. When I look back on that first 3 years, I want to talk a bit about chasing growth. In that early discussion, we decided to launch 3 extra countries, and it had a really windfall piece of luck, but it was really something that gave us a lot of opportunity. It was generally a good time to be a trader, despite that one crazy day. And that then led us, as a flow-on, to go into Europe early, much earlier than we'd expected. And we were there by 2007. And that meant that when the GFC hit and hit hard, we were there, we were ready. We had a great team in the UK. We'd been able to hire from all over the world. We had programmers coming from different countries in Europe. Most of them seemed to be called Vladimir and were Russian, but they were a fantastic team. Now, it's really hard to describe what trading is like during a global financial crisis. But that crazy day in Korea that we saw, that half an hour of craziness when there was a nuclear alert, it was like that every day. It was like that every day for about 18 months. And, there was fear, there was governments under pressure, banks were failing, it was frenzied buying and selling, and it was exhausting because every day was like your busiest day you've ever had in your career. And I'd been trading for 7 or 8 years by then, and I'd never seen anything like it, and I've never seen anything like it since. Now, that GFC, it caused us, obviously, try to be flexible and agile around our decision making, but also to question our assumptions. What we thought was the world norm, that banks couldn't fail, that Lehman Brothers couldn't go under, these assumptions were rapidly changing. And in fact, to give you an example, we had a multi-billion-dollar trading facility that allowed us to buy, using that money, anything in the world, basically. And the bank that provided it had a sort of a banking division for us, and they had a massive insurance business, and they went under overnight. And the Dutch government, it was a Dutch-Belgian conglomerate, and the Dutch government came in and said, we're going to hive off kind of the Dutch banking part of the business and let the Belgian insurance side fail. And the Dutch government nationalised this enormous bank overnight. Now, they could have just said, you've got a couple of $1 billion in credit that you're using. It's a global credit crisis. I won't go into the details, but there's a credit crunch. So credit was very difficult to get. And they could have just said, we don't need this, we'll take that line back and see you later, you shut down overnight. But fortunately, they seemed to like our business, and some Dutch Minister for Finance approved our lines to stay in place. But those assumptions that we had to change were very, I guess, mind-blowing, that we had to really think about how the world had changed over time. Now, it was a perfect storm for traders, huge amounts of volatility, huge amounts of activity, a lot of our competitors and financial institutions going under, which was bringing talent back out onto the market. So in that instance, we really were able to take advantage. And I suppose the lesson was that when the crisis averted, we were left with a massive staff and a massive overhead, and I think we were burning about $1 million a week at the end of the crisis when everything settled down, and that caused a big drag on performance as we had to then manage much, much quieter markets. The other thing I'd just like to touch on briefly is around decision making. Our goal was to attract the best and brightest in the market and to make them remunerated and treated fairly and pay an equity in order to be really included and part of the journey. Now, we did that, but we also thought that the talent wanted to have a say in decision making. So we made our entire structure very consensus-driven, and we made our entire organisation sort of live that culture. And it was fantastic in the early days, where you had collaboration and you had a sense of team and a sense of unity and purpose. But as the company got bigger, we had massive fragmentation of decision-making, multiple voices internally, really complex debates and complex issues to try to resolve. And it was very much like companies have when they take on outside investment for the first time, and suddenly they've got this disparate group of people that all want different things. The issue for us is we had that internally, and that was very difficult. Ultimately, it led to me, I think to realise that it's a double-edged sword. That consensus-driven approach is fantastic for alignment and in a small team, but as you get bigger, you need a really clear way to work out who's making decisions and where the mandate comes for leadership, because you've got very different types of leadership in an organisation. I threw this photo in just because I like it, but it's really sort of shows just how old school things were in those days. The change has been incredible. As I said, the changes in our business and the leadership sort of caused me eventually to exit my business, which I've largely done. I still retain an equity stake in the business, but I've moved on to a brand new startup, and it's obviously really exciting for me. I've got a fantastic new team, and I'm hoping that one day there'll be a story to tell about that business, and if there is, I'd love to share it with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. You want to come over to the bar, or are we going to go to the living room?
Oh,
We're gonna go to the
Normally
bar?
when I sit at a bar, no one really listens to
All
me,
right,
so
let's go to the bar. Let's go to the bar.
try it, see what happens.
All right. So we've got about 10 minutes, and one of the things I want to talk to you about is hiring, because your business was a little different from many startups here. You hired, in the first year, you hired about 50 people?
Yep.
Because that's just incredible. For a startup, I know, I've done 2. We hired like 1, 2, 3 in the first year, and that's what most startups kind of do.
Yeah.
Tell me, did you know anything about recruitment when you started?
Yeah, so we were a little lucky in that in our industry there was some really effective mathematical testing that you could put traders through. For every 1,000 people that sat that test, you might get 50 that passed. And that was an 8-minute way of screening out 950 people. So it was very effective. It really helped us to get through a lot of numbers. Then, of course, you had to understand whether the person had the maths, but also the ability to work in a team. So we were lucky. I think at one point early, we were getting 1,000 applicants a month for various jobs. Wow. We had probably around 07, 8, 9 maybe.
Yeah. And was it like, did you do the hiring yourself? Was it you and the co-founders who always vetted every single person?
Yeah, I did a lot of it myself individually. Probably of that first 50 to 80 staff, we were able to build a really great team. People that would have been leaders in their field wherever they were. And they were people who could go out and lead a team of 8 or 10. And if you had 10 or 15 of them, suddenly you've got 100 people and things are really moving. So I did a lot. We ended up, we didn't rate HR early, and then we sort of ended up with 7 or 8 HR people because it just was getting so difficult. But no, certainly there was, again, a lot of consensus-driven hiring, but we really did know what we wanted. And even today, I've always been comfortable recruiting. It's something I find pretty easy.
Yeah, yeah. And tell me about, like, you talked a little bit about feeling that you really needed to give these sort of, I guess, real sort of superstars a part of the business. So did everyone own a bit of Tibra Capital, like all your employees?
No, I mean, I think we had about 35 out of the first 200. So it wasn't like everyone would get, but there was a 50% profit pool. So everyone in the company shared that 50% of all earnings went towards paying remuneration, and that was unprecedented in the market and really made us an employer of choice for a few years there. And but the equity was a little more tricky. I mean, sometimes you make decisions so quickly, like we said, should we make the equity that these guys come in voting or non-voting? And then we thought, it might feel like we're being dodgy if we make it non-voting, so we'll just make everyone's equity the same. And suddenly you've got 7 blokes that are averaging 10 to 16% of a company. And you don't have to be Einstein to work out that that's going to be really hard to make decisions when you've always got sort of so many voices.
Yeah, yeah. You spoke about kind of luck, and I guess for a lot of startups, and we've heard actually throughout today, there's luck, involved in a really successful startup. But I think one of the things that's coming through and is clear, from your story, is that you make your own luck by really being in the right place when that lightning strikes.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of people lose a lot of money just as easily as we've made it, and that's not necessarily because they're not good at what they do. There is a lot of luck involved, but I think, certainly in trading, it's a numbers game. You do thousands, if not millions, of transactions a month, and if you know that on the average you're good at what you do, you'll ride through the ups and downs, and it's just, it's a numbers game. So I think you're always going to have a bit of luck, and you just got to cherish it and enjoy the moment. And at the same time, you don't let the downs. We try to not get too worried about making heaps of money because we thought, well, if we don't make money, we've also got to lift our spirits. So we try to stay very level regardless of the week we've had.
Yeah. Let's jump to a few on the screen. So the first one is, what financial technology trends do you see emerging and disrupting the market? And I'm going to put Bitcoin out there, being, with the audience we have. What do you, in 30 seconds, what do you think of Bitcoin?
I have a staff member who knows much more about it than I do. I think there's a place for digital currency. I don't think it'll be really big for at least a decade. That'll be my view. But look, I think there's a place for it, and I think one currency will survive. One digital currency will survive.
Yeah. Male-dominated trading industry. What's your strategy on diversity? Did you have any women traders?
Yeah, out of the hundreds I've worked with, there was only a couple. Look, we're a meritocracy. Like, we couldn't make more females interested or make them better at it. Not many applied, and then, you know, like 95% of people that we interviewed or tested, we didn't hire anyway, and that was male or female. So I think it's something that now that you're on screens and the old days of the trading floors have gone, probably it's a lot more opportunity for women because they're not necessarily as aggressive as men, and you don't need to be behind a screen. Behind a screen, you can be anybody. So, but I think it does take a certain type of person to be a trader, and you know, I think especially when you're trading in really quickly. I don't know. I don't know, but all I know is that I would hire anyone if they were good enough, male or female, and I did work with a few.
Yeah. So I want to spend the last 3 or 4 minutes that we've got talking about your new startups, because having left Tibra Capital, you've founded, I know of 2 businesses, and let's start on the first, is a cricket program, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that and what got you excited about that?
Yeah, I'm a cricket tragic. I play and I love it. I watch it and I talk about it, and my developers don't seem to share my passion. But look, I saw a great business opportunity. I backed someone else with seed funding, so it's not really my business, but I'm heavily involved in it. I just think online content and e-learning is huge, and if it's cricket, all the better. The second one is Nino, which is really my baby, and it's mobile e-commerce. My goal is for every person in the world who monetizes their own labour to do it efficiently using a mobile phone and using access to shared resources around the world. So that's
Great.
them
and
in a
what
nutshell.
stage is that? What stage is this?
We're about to go into. We're launching next week.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of premises that we've kitted out as these sort of shared infrastructure centres, and any freelance provider, like it could be hair, makeup, beauty, yoga, massage, consultants, gardeners, anyone who sells their time and labour can get on our system for free, use it, and we're essentially a bit of a payment plug-in, but we provide all this value up front that doesn't cost. They can use our shared service centres. They book a chair by the hour or a massage table by the hour. They bring their customer, they make a living, they leave, and there's completely no friction for them, either in terms of technology or in terms of real estate. So we're really a dual technology real estate play. Some great questions there. I don't know.
Yeah, I like this. I like actually the second one. Many great developers, aren't great communicators. What advice would you give to aspiring developers for improving their people skills?
I think just spend time with different types of people, and the more time you spend with people, the more you'll learn that, people have their differences, but they also have their similarities, and it's not that hard to find commonalities. I know when I was a young trader, it was pretty uncool to talk to the software guys, but, I bonded with lots of them over, Commodore 64 games and various other things we had in common, and just talk to people, spend time with people. No one expects you to be something you're not.
And how did you pay for the initial 17 employees? Was it external funding?
As I said, we had no external funding at all. We started with $7 million in startup capital that came from us, from myself and one other guy put in probably 80% of that, and then the other guys cobbled together the rest. So we were very lucky that we'd been previously in a career that had sort of paid well through our 20s. And, we were in that position. So very lucky. I don't have any external fundings. I've funded both my startups that I'm currently involved with. So I've never raised capital before. It's an interesting one. I'm probably going to do it soon. With Centre Wicket's going to raise money soon. We actually just raised $500,000, but it's in tech. It's in technology for equity. It's a very interesting. Our partner's here somewhere. And it's a tech for equity swap, which is quite interesting. We're getting 3 of their gun software guys to come in, enterprise grade infrastructure, and obviously we've given them equity in return.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, we've got to call it a day now. Thank you very much, Danny. Really appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.